for my goals. Okay, and depending on what your goals are, you might get a different answer than the person sitting next to you has a different goal. You might end up getting a completely different breed. And then we're going to talk about flock maintenance. How do I maintain these birds that I've spent a lot of time and energy in, with feed costs being what they are, a lot of money getting? How do I maintain them? How do I manage them in order to get them to reach the goals that I have kind of set out and hoped for here? I don't know why this thing does not want to work.
No, it's my fault. Every time I click to do something, I don't click back on it.
Oh, okay.
There you go. You're good now.
All right. So as we go through here, we're going to talk about starting your own flock. And I want to give you a few fun facts about poultry that you may not know. There are 25 billion chickens on the earth. Okay. A lot of people have poultry. All right. Globally. As chickens age, they tend to lay fewer but larger eggs. Weight for weight. So if you get a dozen eggs from a hen in her first year, and you were to weigh each dozen, they're probably going to weigh somewhere around 22 to 24 ounces, and you're likely going to get that dozen eggs out of that first year chicken in about 12 to 14 days. As she gets older, she's probably in that 12 to 14 day period of time only going to give you 6 eggs, but they're going to weigh 22 to 24 ounces, if not maybe a little bit more. So a lot of folks are like, my hens are in their second or third year, and I'm just not getting as many eggs. They're getting as much eggs by weight and volume. They're just not, the hens are packaging them in larger packages. Okay, so just a neat thing to kind of keep in mind. A hen has to eat 4 pounds of feed to make 1 dozen eggs. That's a pretty accurate conversion. So when we start talking about feed efficiency on different breeds, some breeds are better at converting feed to eggs than others are. And we'll talk about some of those factors. A chicken heart beats up to 400 times per minute. So their pulse is up there. When a predator comes by, when a hawk flies over and releases a bunch of adrenaline into that hen, that can double. All right. So that's why many times if something is scaring our hens, they don't lay as well, they don't perform as well, because they've got all that stress going on and all of their energy is being spent on survival. Even if it's not a real threat, they're in a completely enclosed pen, but the dog keeps going back and forth or maybe standing there barking at them. They're not going to perform as well in terms of egg production because of this stress factor that they're going to have. In Gainesville, Florida, it is illegal to eat fried chicken by any method other than using your bare hands. It's actually a law that's on the books. I thought that was kind of interesting. That's not what you're here for, though. All right. There are a couple of options for you as you consider starting your own backyard flock. And really it boils down to kind of these 2 options. Number one, you start with mature birds that are laying. We have a lot of folks who will email us. We have a lot of folks who will call the extension office and say, I don't want to mess with brooding baby chicks. It's too much headache. It's too hard. I will kill all of them. I just want to start with mature birds. Okay. And that certainly is an option. The other option is to start with baby chicks. Okay. So we're going to go through and talk about the pros and cons of doing each of those. If you're starting with mature birds, some of the pros are you have eggs right away. And that's a little bit of a misnomer. If you go to a farm and you buy mature hens and you bring them to your facility, likely they are going to have your egg production interrupted because that's very stressful. They don't know where the food is. They don't know where the water is. They don't know if this place is safe. Hens are producing eggs with a high level of maternal instinct in play. And so they're not going to say, hey, I think it's great to have offspring here if they don't know where here is. And until they get used to and settled in and going, hey, you know what? The water's in the same place today as it was yesterday. Oh, look, here's a new day and the water is still there. They begin to settle in and get accustomed to the place. And that's when egg production will pick up. Okay. But the nice thing is you have eggs almost immediately after getting mature birds. You don't have to brood chicks. A lot of folks are scared of brooding chicks. They're afraid they're going to mess it up. But it's actually not hard. And we're going to kind of help you go through the basics of that tonight. The cons, you really don't know what they're bringing with them. there's a whole microflora. We've all been through this thing called the COVID pandemic, right? We've been at war with something we can't see, something we can't measure, something that we have a hard time testing for, something we have a hard time being accurate in terms of vaccinating for, right? We've learned a little bit about the fact that viruses can hitch rides on all kinds of things and can spread really rapidly. When you go to a farm and you get a mature bird off that farm, it may be healthy on that farm, but you're going to bring it to your farm and it's going to be introduced to a whole new microflora that it's never been introduced to before, and its immune system is going to have to battle those things. The other challenge is it might be bringing something from that farm onto your farm that in worst case scenarios you can never get rid of. Okay, a little disease that if you Google it, it will scare you. It's called Merrick's, and Merrick's is basically an avian cancer. It's not transmittable to humans, but once you get Merrick's in your flock, there is no way you can burn your poultry house down to the ground and scorch the earth, and you will still have Merrick's. The half-life on Merrick's is about 150 years. So it lingers. Once you get it in, you have to vaccinate everything that comes onto your farm for Merrick's, or you run a chance of losing it. So there are all kinds of problems with moving mature birds. Most poultry farms do not ever bring a mature bird into their operation, because even if they're bringing in 10 mature birds, in order to get better genetics, they're putting their 3,000 or 4,000 birds at risk. I mean, it could be catastrophic. And so one of the things we want to make sure, there's some things we want to ask a lot of questions if we're buying mature birds. We want to know from that breeder or from that farm what safeguards they have in place to make sure that the birds we're getting are safe and healthy. It's really difficult to age a mature bird. We used to have a lot of flea markets here where folks would sell chickens, and somebody go up and go, "How old is that bird?" And the person tells you, "Oh, they're just a year old." Well, how do I know that that hen's a year old and not 3 years old or 5 years old? Or bless her heart, she's a geriatric bird in really good condition. She hadn't laid an egg in 2 years, but she looks pretty. And so we buy that mature bird. We have no idea. I mean, we can guess somewhat closely based on looking at some characteristics, but it's really difficult to know exactly what we're getting when we're getting mature birds. They are more expensive up front. What do you think the going price is for a mature laying hen, let's say a yearling? No guess? 20? Anybody think it's more than that? 50? If you're buying a rare breed, certainly they're probably the average for just an average production bird market right now is about $27 to $30 a hen. Okay, so that's a pretty sizable investment, right, in a mature bird. So you're going to spend more money up front, but you're going to have a return on that investment more immediately in terms of egg production. So those are kind of the pros and cons on that side. And then the stress in the new environment may turn off egg production pretty quickly. The other option is starting with baby chicks. The pros are, you know how old they are when you get them. All right. When you get a baby chick and it's fluffy, you know that chick's probably a week or so old. As they mature, you can get a better idea. That chick's 5 weeks old. That chick, but if it's a chick, it's still making the peak noise that a chick makes. We know that it's under a year of age. We have a pretty good idea of how old they are. They are easier. It's a lot easier to buy clean birds. When I'm saying clean birds, I'm saying birds that don't have viral or bacterial hosts on them. It's a lot easier to buy clean birds when they're baby chicks, because they've been hatched in a sterile environment. They've been brooded in a sterile environment. If they are started, if you're buying started chicks, which is a really good option because they have 2 to 3 to 4 days to get their immune system kicked in gear, and you're buying started birds and then moving them to your home, their immune system's ready to go. It's ready to kind of tackle whatever might be in your environment. It's more cost efficient. Even with feed prices being what they are, you can raise a bird to maturity and to the onset of lay a lot cheaper or a lot less expensive per bird than buying a mature bird. You're paying somebody else for their time, for their feed costs, for their investment in terms of raising that bird, where you're going to be able to raise it likely a little less expensive than what you'd be able to buy a mature bird for. You also have a real low stress environment. That chick is getting used to your voice. It knows you're feeding it, you're watering it. When you move it around on your farm, it's still relatively familiar, and you don't have that stress of moving it to a brand new location with brand new people, brand new noises, brand new sounds, all of that kind of stuff. The cons, it's going to be about 20 weeks, depending on the breed, before you get eggs. So there's a waiting game. There's a wait involved before you're going to get production out of them. You will have to brood chicks. It's not difficult, right? It's pretty easy. Once you know what to do, it's pretty easy, but you do have to go through the effort of brooding chicks and raising them. And you will have a housing transition. At some point, they'll go from what we call a brooder, and we set one up over here in a minute. We'll start kind of moving around and showing you what you'll want to do that. You're going to have a housing transition at some point, though. At some point, they're not going to need the warmth of a heat lamp. You're going to begin moving them out into what's going to be their pen, or there may be a transition pen somewhere in between there. So there's a little work, a little planning, and a little bit of effort in terms of doing that. But overall, you want to create the right brooding environment, and you want to have graduated warmth. So just looking over here at this brooder and the way it's set up, we've got a heat lamp set up at one end. We're going to have one zone of our brooder that's going to be warmer than the other part of our brooder, so that if a chick goes over and gets a drink of cold water and it gets a little chilled, it can move over under the light and warm up. And then once it's comfortable again, it'll venture back out to the other side. If they get a little too warm, they can move away from the heat source. And so setting up a brooder with a graduated warmth zone is a real low stress way of keeping them very comfortable. We want to use dry pine shavings. You can pick up a bag like that, and to set up your brooder, I opened that bag, and you can see I just used a little bit to put in that tub. So shavings will go a pretty long way. We want to make sure that they're dry. We get a lot of questions. How often do I change the shavings? Well, when they stop being kind of fluffy, when they start getting matted, or there's moisture in there, that's time to gather up your baby chicks, put them in a cardboard box, clean out your brooder, refresh it with dry shavings, put the baby chicks back in. We want to make sure that it stays dry. Those pine shavings are going to absorb moisture. They're going to absorb and really lower the threshold of ammonia that's going to be produced from that. But when they start getting wet, ammonia is going to be the thing that follows. And so we want to keep everything dry in there. We want to make sure and use pine shavings. Cedar shavings are a real problem, because why are cedar shavings a problem, Abby?
Well, their chickens are a bit allergic to cedar shavings. They'll lose all their feathers, and then you'll have a bunch of featherless chickens running around. So,
which is really not a very good look at all. And it takes a pretty long while for them to grow feathers back in. They might go a whole season before they actually grow them back. And so, you know, it looks like you went into the meat market, you know, the meat counter at Walmart or at Kroger, and resurrected a bunch of those hens. So they're walking around, they have not a single feather on them. So stay away from cedar shavings.
Hi, Dad.
Yes.
I have someone on Zoom who wants you to explain what is brooding.
Okay, so brooding is a word that we use to describe what we do with baby chicks. They are, when a baby chick hatches, it's about 1.5 ounces. And so at 1.5 ounces body weight, it can't generate a whole lot of its own body heat. It's been pretty dependent on the incubator or on the mama hen to provide heat. To incubate it, it still needs some help keeping its body temperature. Now they're going to grow really fast. They'll double in size just about every week, all the way up through about 6 weeks of age. By the time they get up to where they're weighing about 1 pound to 1.5 pounds, they've also grown in feathers, which are insulation. They're able to keep that body heat in. But for the first few weeks, particularly the kind of temperatures we have right now, we want to shield them from the cold, because they can suffer from hypothermia really, really quick. So brooding just means we're going to keep them in more of a controlled environment, and we're going to provide enough warmth for them. Typically, that first week, we want to keep that environment at about 90 degrees. The second week, it can go into the 80s. The third week, we can start backing into high 70s. By the fourth week, they can tolerate room temperature pretty well, but they can't tolerate a 30-degree wind draft. It'll really pull the heat out of them, and they can't catch it back up. Trying to recover from hypothermia is a real struggle. And we've had it happen when we have power outages or something happens and brooder, you know, we've got systems that are set up. If the system gets a little weak, you'll know they'll be chirping really loud. They'll tell you, I'm cold. If you can't immediately increase that temperature, then it can be a pretty big problem. So that's what we're referring to when we're talking about brooders, just a controlled temperature environment. We want to make sure and keep it clean. Again, it's going to mean changing, depending on the size of our brooder and the number of chicks we have in there. Obviously, if I put 12 baby chicks in there and one that size, I may not have to change it out for 10 days. But if I put 50 and one that size, it's going to get soiled a lot more quickly. I want to change it out more often. We want to make sure it's safe and secure. And a lot of people think, well, I've got them in my garage, so there aren't any hawks and there aren't any foxes and there aren't any coyotes going to get to them. But we forget about, you know, Buffy and Fluffy, the dog and the cat, who are predators too. And sometimes they like to get a chicken snack and they don't know, you know, they just think, hey, that little thing's running around in that pen. And normally if I were outside and something was running around and it looked edible, right? So we want to make sure that it's safe and secure from our pets or anything that might create a problem there. We want to make sure that baby chicks have a sense of flock. This is called having their social needs met. In order to do that, we recommend having at least 3. The reason we start with 3 is if something happens to one of them, we're not leaving one by itself. A baby chick by itself, solo, will stress itself to death. It'll stop eating, it'll stop drinking, it will chirp and chirp and chirp until it has a friend or a partner. So we want to make sure their social needs are met. And so we recommend a minimum of 3. If you can start with a half dozen, that gives you a little more of a buffer zone. If you're a little more ambitious, you really don't spend any more money on equipment raising 12 than you would raising 6. So kind of think about that, and we'll also talk to you about chicken math. Anybody know chicken math? No matter how many you have, you can always add a few more, okay? We want them to have a sense of flock. We want to limit our handling on baby chicks. For the first week or so, we really want to limit how much we're handling them. We don't want to, and we see this all the time, folks will pick up a baby chick, what's the first thing they do? Okay? They want to bring it right up to their face, right? They want to talk to it real close. And what we're doing is we're exposing them to germs that are not a natural part of what they're doing, but we're also, that baby chick is poop, it's stepped in poop, and what are we putting on our hands? E. coli, salmonella, okay, the stuff that's normal and natural in their poop, we're getting it on our hands. And, you know, we advise parents all the time with little kids that want to get them right up in their face. We don't want to do that. So limit the handling of them for the first week or so until their immune systems kind of get underway. As they get older, you can handle them all you want. Just we advise everybody, wash your hands before you handle them for their safety. Wash your hands after you handle them for yours. That way we're making sure that we're not transferring germs back and forth. You will need a heat lamp. We brought one over here. Abby, if you'll hold these things up and talk about them, you'll need a heat lamp, something like that, depending on where you get it. Bonnie's Barnyard, which, by the way, Bonnie's Barnyard is located in Triune. They donated all these things for display tonight for us. And so you'll need a heat lamp. Just the apparatus itself is going to range anywhere from $10 to $15. And you'll need a heat lamp bulb. Yeah, so if you bring them over where the camera can, you'll need a heat lamp bulb. Heat lamp bulbs come in 2 basic sizes and 2 basic colors, either 125 watt or a 250 watt. 250 watt actually is going to provide more heat, so depending on the area you're trying to heat. They come in clear. The one over there in the box that Abby's going to hold up is a clear heat lamp. What's the price on that, Abby? It's on the front. $5.99 for a clear. If you buy the same size in red, it's going to usually be $7.99. Some folks will insist that a red heat lamp will keep your baby chicks from pecking on one another. It does help reduce pecking order issues, but primarily baby chicks are going to have pecking order issues if they're too crowded. So the best thing to do is not have them crowded, and you can save a little money on the actual heat lamp bulbs that you'll buy. Almost every farm store you'll find, Co-op, TSC, You know, the mom and pop shop, Bonnie's Barnyard, any of those places are going to have these supplies, especially this time of year. You will need a feeder, a waterer. We've got some up here that you can look at. Those are real simple, basic things that you can keep and use over and over and over again. They're dishwasher safe. You can take them apart, you can clean them, run them through the dishwasher, and be able to use them that way. They also come in larger sizes. And we'll talk a little bit about kind of grading and deciding, you know, what size do I need to get to start off with. As you move toward mature hens, and if you're raising a larger volume of them, you want to get the largest container you can to start with. That's a 3-gallon waterer. That's a product made by Little Giant. Some of the ones that we first started with back in 2004, okay, when Hannah was, you know, in 4th grade and starting the chick chain project, we're still using today. Okay, we've been through all the winters and all that stuff, and they're a very durable product, but they come in 3-gallon, 5-gallon, 7-gallon. I don't recommend the 7-gallon ones if you're going to be carrying them, you know, filling them up over here and carrying them, because the 7-gallon water is pretty heavy to carry. But something, you know, 3 to 5-gallon water would be great, and you're not constantly having to refill them. So a heat lamp, a feeder, a waterer, and shavings, and then you'll need a container. That's a water trough. You don't have to go buy a stainless steel water trough. Rubber water troughs work great. Rubbermaid tubs work great, depending on the size that you're doing. I don't recommend cardboard boxes. Cardboard boxes tend to get wet and then they fall apart, and now you're having to clean up, you know, double the mess. Some folks will build their brood box. They'll build it out of wood, build it out of plywood. And there's a wide variety of ways that you can go about that. And there are a lot of DIY plans for building a brooder box that you can Google and be able to put together.
Someone asked about online about push button waterers.
All right, so push button waterers, there's a whole host of watering devices that work well with adult birds. With baby chicks, we do recommend gravity flow. So this one, a chick takes a drink, and then when the water line drops, an air bubble will go up and it'll release more water. Those tend to be really, really efficient, and they don't leak as bad. Push button waterers, there are a lot of watering nipples where when the hen hits a little toggle, it will release water. Those work really well as well. But typically they work better with older hens that have more of the pecking instinct. Baby chicks, these little waterers here, the gravity flow ones are really a little bit better of an option for you. All right, let's talk about nutrition and care. This is the one where a lot of folks make a lot of mistakes, and there's a lot of really bad information on the internet that really throws people off. Basically, a chicken, from the time it's little, what a baby chick eats the first 12 weeks of its life is going to play a significant role in how it's going to produce for the rest of its life, how healthy it's going to be for the rest of its life. So we don't really want to experiment with nutrition. We want to make sure we're giving that baby chick everything it needs that first 12 weeks that are really, really critical. They're only good as the nutrition they consume and the water they have to drink. I encourage everybody to feed a balanced ration. And the reason I recommend this is a nutritionist who's gone to school and studied nutrition, and poultry nutrition specifically, are the ones formulating these complete rations. A complete ration, basically, the way I like to describe it is every time that chicken takes a bite, it's getting 100% of everything it needs. It's getting a bite of vitamins, a bite of minerals, it's getting a bite of protein, it's getting its carbs, its fat, it's getting its calcium and supplements, all the things that are going to be needed. Those have all been put in and blended together into a complete ration. Feed a complete ration if you want to make sure that your birds are going to produce well and they're going to live, you know, long, productive, healthy lives. They need the right diet for the right stage of development. And I'm going to go through the requirements by age. They need water that's clean, fresh, and constant. They never need to run out of water, and you need to make sure that the water is clear. Can I tell them our little litmus test? Yeah. I asked Abby, you think that water is clean? Oh yeah, it's clean. You want to take a sip of it? Okay, I'll clean it. All right. We want to make sure the water is clean enough that we would drink from it. They'll drink dirty water, but they won't drink as much of it as they need to. And so we want to make sure that On any surface that we have, we'll get algae growth, particularly if we've got lighting coming in and we've got water and we've got a surface for algae to grow on, it's going to grow on it. Chickens will scratch around, they'll kick debris into the watering surface and area. We need to make sure that we're keeping that good and clean so that they're drinking. Anytime they're a little bit thirsty, they're not hesitant about drinking that water. Free ranging and grazing, everything within moderation, including moderation, right? Birds love to get out and free range. There are a couple of challenges with that. Coyotes free range, hawks free range, owls free range, especially this time of year. All the easy picking, all the slow mice are gone. All the slow squirrels are gone. And the owls, I don't know if they have Twitter or what they've got, but if they find you opening your chicken coop, you'll have 20 of them in your backyard the next morning waiting for you to open your chicken coop. And so I like to think about grazing and free ranging. We need to kind of control the environment a little bit. If you have some help, you can do it with a little more security. We have English Shepherds. They do a great job of predator control and predator reduction, and they view those birds as part of their family, and so they're real protected. If you don't have those protective measures, the best thing you can do is to make sure they have plenty of room in their coop or in their run. But a bird will not get all of their nutritional needs met by grazing. They're going to need more protein. They're going to need, typically protein is the real crucial thing. They're going to need more than what they're going to get when they're free ranging. And so we want to be responsible owners. We want to make sure that we're giving them a complete ration. And then we treat grazing like dessert or treats. We don't want the majority of their food supply coming from those sources. Grains and fruit. Grain does not have, so, hen scratch. Right? It's cheap. It's the cheapest feed you can buy, but it does not have enough protein in it to sustain a hen's egg production. You're looking at 6 to 8% protein in most of the grains that are in hen scratch. Think about grains as energy, chocolate, candy, high carbs, right? Lots of calories. It's an energy source. So during the winter, when they're really cold, giving grain as a treat is a good thing because it gives them a little extra energy and helps them stay warm. But we do not want that to be their sole ration. We'll get a lot of calls here at the extension office. I bought 12 hens and they were in egg production. And here we are a month later and they've all quit laying. The person who sold them to me must have ripped me off. And so I'll ask, what are you feeding? Hen scratch? And then I have to go through the uncomfortable part of saying a hen needs 16% protein in her daily diet in order to maintain her health and produce an egg. When we drop below that, when we cut it in half, almost a third, she's going to work to stay alive. She's not going to be concentrated on laying eggs. So we need to make sure that they're getting all the nutrition that they need. Some fruit, particularly fruit with different kinds of that have high pectin levels, will mimic a hormone that a chicken naturally produces that makes her stop laying eggs and want to brood or go broody or set on those eggs. When she goes broody, she's going to stop making eggs. Well, if we feed fruits that are high in those pectin levels, many times it will create that response, and then it takes about 12 to 18 weeks for them to recover from that process. So,
can you tell some of those specific fruits? That was a question on Zoom.
what was the question?
Some of the ones that are high in pectin,
So we want, apple peelings. A lot of folks think, oh, my hens love apple peelings. They love them because they're red. Red and really drives the pecking order. You'll notice that a lot of the feeder and waterer bases are red. That draws the bird to it to begin to eat it. Apple peelings, not a good treat. It's okay if they eat one now or then, but if we're constantly giving them apple peelings, we're going to shut their production down. That's one of the big ones. Some peach peels, they love them, but they will have some of those higher pectin levels in there that will create a real problem. Things like cantaloupe, watermelon rinds, they love watermelon, doesn't have any of that pectin in it. They'll go to town on watermelon and they will literally leave nothing but the skin, okay? They love it. Watermelon's also got a lot of water in it. It'll help them stay hydrated. Things like that. pretty safe to feed to them. And again, if they get into it today, and it was just a treat for today, probably not a problem. But we're talking about sustained over a period of time. They're getting that treat every single day. Those levels can get high enough to shut their egg production down. All right, this symbol here is a really important symbol. NPIP stands for the National Poultry Improvement Plan, and they have a level of standards that they go by. And a flock owner can go and become NPIP certified. And basically what that means is my flock is free of two real no-no diseases, typhoid and pylori. And so if they're typhoid, pylori free, you qualify to be NPIP certified. You also have to follow a biosecurity protocol that says, I'm not bringing adult birds into my flock. I have a closed flock. I'm also not letting other flock owners walk in and around our pens. We have to, with the hatchery that Abby runs, we have to distribute all baby chicks off the side of our farm. We can't have poultry owners coming into our farm. Poultry owners are carrying poultry dust from their own flocks right into our farm. So to become NPIP certified, your birds have to test free. They'll come out, they make a little pinprick in the artery under the wing. They take one drop of blood, they test it. They do it on every bird that you have. Once a year, every flock will be recertified. That turns into a pretty hot, messy July for us, okay? And July is kind of our annual testing time. And so where we have 600 birds, it's a pretty day-long process. And we have several folks from the USDA that come out and they set up the little boards with the little testing solutions. We get results back pretty quickly, but it's a time involved process. You really don't want to buy birds from a place that's not NPIP certified. Okay.
Would you say
Typhoid and pylori are the two things that when you see that seal, it means the flock that your birds have originated from, if you're buying from something that has that seal, are typhoid and pylori free. Means that we went through and tested everything. We're all living in the same space, breathing the same air in the same environment, and there was no typhoid or pylori present. Now, when they introduced this, about 3 decades ago, and backyard flock owners were pretty well exempt from it. Now, a lot of backyard farmers and backyard flock owners have started doing this as a way of just offering a quality measure to what they're doing, and also to protect their investments. I can't remember the last time a bird tested positive. I mean, all of our kids that bring birds to show here during the summer, we test every single one of them as they're coming in to make sure that there aren't any of them that are positive, and we haven't had a positive test in I don't know when, but it's because of these measures that have really helped reduce and control it. Yes, sir.
So I noticed neither one of those two diseases was that pernicious cancer, the one that has 150-year.
Yeah, Merrick's is typically there's no way to test for Merrick's until a bird dies from it. And then they go in, you take it to Cord Animal Diagnostics, and they'll run a test and they'll go through and tell you whether or not, but by the time you find out, it's already in your property. Yeah. Biosecurity is the only way to control the spread of something like Merrick's or any of the other contagious diseases that are out there. And I mean, intensive biosecurity measures. If I drive my farm truck onto a farm that has poultry, we have a pump up spray bottle with bleach in it. And when I get home, I stop, about 600 yards from our poultry facility. I spray the whole thing down. It has to air dry. There's a whole set of protocols that we have to utilize. We have a lot of folks that call and say, I'd love to come see your operation. We can't do that. And so, most folks are understanding. Sometimes folks get a little irritated. Well, I just want to come see. Well, I understand you want to come see, but we literally can't do that unless we suit you up, boot you up, put booties on you, make it, you look like you're in a walking hazmat suit in order to be able to do that. And even then, we're really nervous about containment and controls and those kinds of things. Okay, so it's where an ounce of prevention really does end up being a significant amount of cure. Yes, ma'am. Yes. There's not a way to soil test. There's that I know of. If you're purchasing a farm, it'd be a really good idea to kind of have a little bit of history on that farm And if there is a poultry pen in place on the farm, and unless it's just a really nice established something, or you might want to consider maybe moving and building your first poultry pen in a different location, just to see how that works. Okay, and we'll get into some of the what about and what ifs here in just a little bit. Okay. All right. So you've got a lot of choices to make when selecting birds. Some choices are preference, others are really mandatory. You want to make sure that you buy birds from an NPIP source. Okay. It's just a good safeguard on your hand that you're getting birds that aren't going to bring something your way that you don't want. Biosecurity, an NPIP certification is completely worthless if the farm is public. So if you go in and you see an ad, hey, come to our farm and pick out your own chickens, run away. Right? Why? Because hundreds of other people have visited that farm. Guess what they're bringing in on their boots and their clothing? You don't want to do that. And there are farms that operate that way. There's one, I'll just say, out to our east, and they've been closed multiple times by the state veterinary clinic because they were sourced, they were traced back as having this stuff. They closed down for a few months and opened right back up. And it's a come and see, come and pick them up, come and purchase from us on our property. It's just not a good idea. I mean, it terrifies me. And we've heard too many horror stories of people losing their entire flock. Maybe they got 400 birds, they're selling eggs at the farmer's market, and they get a great deal, right, on 10 laying hens for $5 each, right? They got a great deal. They bring their flock and they lose everything. That was the most expensive kind of birds they could have ever purchased. Okay, so you really want to try and follow good biosecurity. Yes, ma'am. Yeah, that's a good question. I wish you hadn't mentioned the trade name. If you'll notice, this young lady and her older sister, if you went into Tractor Supply 10 years ago, you'd see them selling chicks out of one of those, right? And all the little kids were in there coughing, sneezing, and handling all those baby chicks. How many of those do you think survived? Not many. People got them home and they died. You'll notice now Tractor Supply has them caged. A lot of them have them in a brooder. They have signs on them: do not handle, do not, let an employee get those out. Many of their moves, and particularly with Tractor Supply, were because they had folks, calling them and saying it's really pretty irresponsible. You really need to look at containment and doing those kinds of things. And so now a lot of the farm stores are selling where you don't handle them. You let us know what you want. We'll use a fish net. We'll get them out. We'll put them in a box for you, and you walk away with them. You're not actually handling them. But anytime you purchase birds from a public source where there are a lot of people around, you do run the risk of them being exposed to other things. So it's a good question. All right. We want to think critically because they're not just our baby chicks, they're our investment, right? And so we want to try and protect that.
One question, Doug. Someone
Yes.
asked, what kind of distance should I keep agri-tainment people from the flock? I sell items off the property. How far away do I keep the storefront?
Okay, so there are the recommendations for distancing. You want to keep the public, the general public from your flock has changed over the years. At the time that we built our pens, 300 feet was the bare, that was the bare minimum. It went up from there and it's come back down now, but you want to keep folks a pretty good distance away. 300 feet, I think, would be good. That's 100 yards. Okay, that's a football field. All right, that you want to try and keep public away. At the very least, you may not be able to keep them that far away. You just want to make sure that they're not walking into your pens and into the areas where you have the birds contained. And you probably want to limit your free ranging when you have a lot of traffic on your farm. You want to limit the birds free ranging because they're going to be right out there trafficking right where other people are traffic. Great question. Great question. Okay. If you were to call Tyson or any of the growers for Tyson or any of the meat production and say, hey, I'd like to come visit your farm, it's not going to happen, right? And the reason it's not is because they've got a sizable investment there that they're trying to protect. We like to think of our birds in kind of the same manner. We want to keep them safe and we want to be protected. Now, if we've got a few and we're letting our kids enjoy them and we have a family come over for dinner, I mean, we use discretion, right, in terms of doing that. But in terms of high level of handling or a high continual traffic thing, you want to kind of think about setting a biosecurity barrier where the birds are safe over there. People can still enjoy looking at them, but they're not coming into direct contact with them. MPIP is worthless if a farm is public. You don't want to buy from public sources, even if it seems like a great deal. I just discourage them, don't buy, and you know, it's nothing against the folks selling in the flea market, but it's a high traffic, high public area. And many times this chicken farm is set up here and the next chicken farm is set up right next to them and their cages are touching. And you've just got a wide range where they can pass all kinds of not good critters back and forth to one another. Ask before you buy, ask to see proof, ask references. Okay, are you MPIP certified? Do you have a biosecurity protocol? If so, what is it? Okay, those are really good questions to ask before you buy birds. Okay, selecting the right birds for type and function. You got to ask yourself, what do I really want for my flock? Let's do a little litmus test here. How many of you want meat from your birds? Okay, how many of you want eggs from your birds? How many of you want brown eggs? How many of you want white eggs? How many of you want green eggs? How about dark brown eggs? I don't see a whole lot of hands going up. How many of you just want an egg? You don't care what color it is. Okay, here we go. All right, how many of you want every color you can imagine so you can sell those really cool multicolored dozens, right? All right, so figuring out what you want to get out is going to really help you determine what you want to purchase. As you go through, you know, there are white eggs, there are brown eggs, there are green eggs. There are eggs that are large. There are eggs that are extra large. There's a huge variation there. Quantity. I want a chicken that's really pretty to look at, but I don't really care about the eggs. There are breeds that look really pretty. They won't give you a whole lot of eggs because they're not bred for that. It's not that bird's you know, production standard to produce the same high level volume of eggs that you might get out of a different breed. Meat. Do I want fast meat? Do I want to buy something that's going to, I get it today, and 42 days from now, I can process a 4.5 pound fryer? Or do I want one that I'm going to grow like grandpa and grandma used to? I'm going to use a heritage breed and I'm going to feed it for 15 weeks, 16 weeks, and then I'm going to process it. Okay? One is not bad, one is not good. They are very different. And you're going to end up with a very different kind of product, right, from those two varieties. If I want eggs and meat, you know, I want to be able to get eggs out of this hen, but then at the end of her lay life, I'd like to be able to harvest her for fowl meat. I'd like to be able to utilize that meat. There are dual purpose breeds that do a pretty good job of doing both. Do I want standards? Standard is a normal size hen. Normal size hens or standard size hens usually range mature weight 5 to 8 pounds. Okay, if I want bantams, I'd have to get 5 or 6 of them together in the same cage to weigh 5 pounds. Right, bantams are just a smaller miniature type bird. Do I want ornamentals? Ornamentals are pretty to look at, but they're not going to give me a whole lot of eggs. So give me some bug protection. They're beautiful yard art, but they don't really produce a lot of meat, and they're not necessarily going to produce a lot of eggs. They come in every color and variety you can imagine. So I'm going to rip through these really quick, and then Abby's going to show you some.
30 minutes.
30 minutes. Okay. Buff Orpington, Rhode Island Red, New Hampshire Red, Plymouth Barred Rock. A lot of these breeds, when you hear heritage breeds, and then you hear something like a Jersey Black Giant, that means they were developed in New Jersey. A New Hampshire Red was developed in New Hampshire. A Delaware was developed in Delaware. Those are heritage breeds. They originated here in the U.S. and typically they bear the name of the state or maybe even the county that they were bred in and that they originated in. This is a gold sex link. She is a cross between a Rhode Island Red and a Rhode Island White. Well, it's basically the same bird, just different feather color. What's the big deal about that? Well, an interesting thing happens when we get that cross. They're called sex linked because the females are one color and the males are the other. The females take on usually daddy's color and the males take on mom's color. So when I want to make sure that I'm only raising female chicks, a sex link is a really good option because all the females are going to be golden in color, and all the males are going to be snow white. The other thing that happens is we get this thing called hybrid vigor for egg production. And where both the parent breeds will lay about 250 eggs a year, that offspring is going to lay minimally going to come in around 280 to 320 eggs a year, just because of hybrid vigor. We're getting that heterosis is working in our favor. Same size bird, same feed consumption, just a higher egg yield, which is going to improve our feed efficiency. This white hen down here, a little smaller hen, a little smaller body. If you buy a dozen of white eggs in the grocery store, it's likely her that laid them. That's a white leghorn. Incredibly feed efficient. Smaller bird eats less feed. The reason we pay more for brown eggs in the grocery store is not because they're healthier for us. That's a big myth. Abby has to explain that regularly. I want brown eggs because somebody said they're more nutritious, right? Inside the shell, an egg is an egg is an egg. Same nutrition straight across the board, regardless of the color of the shell. But the hens that lay brown eggs are dual purpose hens. They're going to weigh about 8 pounds at mature weight. It takes more feed to sustain them and more feed to get them to actually be able to produce an egg. And so since it costs more feed to produce that dozen eggs, I'm going to have to sell that dozen eggs for more in order to be able to break even. That's why brown eggs are more expensive. Okay. All right. Just another round to give you an idea. This is a hen called an Americana. And Americanas are kind of unique in that they lay a green tinted egg. We should have brought some eggs, and we didn't do that, some samples. They'll lay, Americanas are known for laying everything from a light blue all the way to a dark green type egg. They are a crossbreed that ended up becoming a purebred. A gentleman brought back some South American jungle fowl that had that real sharp green tinted egg, and he crossed them with a whole lot of different American heritage breeds. And then he took all of those F1s, all that first generation, and he bred them to each other. And he continued doing that. And over a period of time, ended up creating this Americana breed. They're Americana because they're American heritage breeds. A true Americana, when she lays a dozen eggs and we hatch those eggs, we're going to get 12 babies that are all different in color because they're homozygous for feather color. They can be brown, they can be blue, they can be this dark mottled color. They can have any kind of feather color, but they maintain that gene color for shell color. This is a dark Cornish. This is one of the parent breeds used to make the Cornish cross. Very muscular bird, very durable bird. Had a lot of these on early American farms simply because of the durability and for their meat production. They were a great dual purpose breed. This is a Delaware. In 1950, if you walked into a grocery store and bought a freshly dressed fryer, this is what you were buying. And then as folks began working with poultry genetics and breeding and doing crossbreeding and getting that heterosis or hybrid vigor for muscle and meat production, like they were getting hybrid vigor for egg production, that's how we got the Cornish cross. There are all kinds of rumors out there about Cornish cross. I've heard people call them Frankenstein birds, and they're genetically engineered. And they get a really bad rap. What they were bred for is exactly, again, we go back to the goal. If our goal is meat production and we don't want to spend an arm and a leg feeding them, and we want to get a really highly tender, highly palatable product, Cornish cross is the way to go. But you have to feed them. And you have to feed them correctly. You can overfeed them. If you hear somebody complain, well, their legs got bowed and they got too fat or they got too heavy, it's because they were not managed nutritionally. It's not a problem with the breed. A lot of folks will say, I want that heritage breed, but they've been buying the Cornish out of the grocery store for a long while. They raise heritage breed birds. They have to feed them for 16 weeks, not 7 weeks, but 16 weeks to get them to approximately the same weight. And they dress that bird and they got this huge breast bone sticking up and not a whole lot of breast meat. And they're like, oh my goodness, this bird looks like disease, but I raised it myself. They were not developed to have that really large breast type meat on them, and they will not yield as well. The other thing is, At 16 weeks, they've already hit sexual maturity, so that meat's going to be a little, what? It's going to be a little gamey, it can be a little tougher, right? A little more of a chew to it. All right, we're going to have to probably change our cookery method on it. That's going to be one we're going to want to cook low and slow, maybe cook it in a pressure cooker, okay, in a Instapot to make sure that we get that meat tender. A lot of that meat is great meat for soups and stocks and things of that nature, but it's not something you'd want to throw in the grill. You're going to spend a long time chewing on it. So again, you get a different product for a different outcome. All right. This is a brown leghorn, same breed as the white leghorn, just a different feather coloration. When we pull all the pigment out of the chicken, when we have one that's solid white, we tend to notice that they are a little more flighty. There's something about pigmentation in the feathering that helps reduce their stress levels. They're not quite as flighty. And so a lot of folks, backyard flocks are going to be free ranging. Maybe they have pets, they have dogs, whatever. They don't want the bird. White leghorns will see a leaf blowing across the yard and think, it's going to eat me. And they freak out. And then they freak everybody else out. And then we see our egg production drop. Brown leghorns, a little more even keeled, not quite as flighty. And we've got one that we'll show you here in just a minute. In fact, Abby, you want to go grab a brown leghorn and bring it out here while we're talking about that. Okay. But it has pigment in its feathers. So even if it's got just a little bit of pigmentation to the feathering, we see that calm nature. The ones that are solid white, they don't have any feather coloration at all, tend to be a little more flighty, okay? A little more nervous.
Someone asked what a Delaware is best for.
Delawares, they almost went extinct. Okay, they were literally put on the National Registry of Birds that were about to go extinct because when we found a better meat product, people stopped breeding Delawares and they dropped off. Delawares have a lot of really good positive qualities. They're a great dual purpose bird. By the time they get to the end of their lay life, they will have gained enough weight and gotten large enough that they're going to produce a pretty good volume of meat for us. If we're wanting to use them for soup stocks, they'll have a lot as they age. They'll have more fat deposits. They are a very docile bird. They are a very vigorous bird. They are very, very hardy. They're great at free ranging. They have a lot of really positive qualities to them. And fortunately, as of the last 5 or 6 years, they really jumped back. As people have more of an awareness of heritage type breeds, the Delawares have really made a big comeback. This is.
Doug, do you
yes.
have many more slides? It'd be great if I could share my screen so I can show them on Zoom.
I've got just a few more. So let me click through this real quick so that they can see them up here on this, and then we'll do that. These are an example. This is an example here of an ornamental breed. This is a buff Brahma, and they have feathers all the way down on their feet. They're really attractive, but this is going to be one of those not a big high egg producer, maybe 150 to 180 eggs a year. The speckled Sussex is one that is, again, a lot of early American farms have these. They were great at camouflaging. Eggs are a little bit smaller or like a medium-sized egg. Good prolific producers. We have the Wyandottes, and Wyandottes come in a whole wide variety of colors. This is a silver lace up here and a golden lace down here. Okay.
Sorry, I'm doing it for the people on Zoom.
Sure. And I think so. Again, you kind of get the idea. There are darker laying egg breeds. This is a Welsomer. This is a Cuckoo Moran. They're going to lay a darker brown egg. All right. Because you kind of get the idea. There's a wide variety and selection of them. These are an example of the meat breeds. This is a Cornish cross. This bird is about 5 weeks old. They grow really fast. Hybrid vigor is why they develop that quickly. And we want to feed them after they're about 2 weeks old. We want to feed them 12 hours on and 12 hours off. So if we put the feeder in the morning, we let them have it all day. We're going to take that feeder out at night. A lot of folks do that to also reduce rodents and mice getting in at night and eating that feed. It's a great protocol. They will just stand by the feeder and eat. They will not stop. So we have to kind of help them. We have to take the food away from them so that they don't gain weight faster than what their structure will hold. But they're a great meat option. And then there's a large variety of turkeys, obviously heritage breed turkeys, as well as The broad-breasted turkeys are similar to the Cornish. They were basically crossbred for meat production. Yes, sir.
So the Cornish crosses, parents, or is it established?
There are about 6 parent breeds. Okay, so what we're doing is we're basically, to get a Cornish cross, we're using an F1 and an F1 and crossing them. So we're getting kind of the double hybrid vigor. And they are crossbacks between basically 3 breeds. The white Plymouth Rock, the dark Cornish, and there's another Cornish variety. It's not the Cornish game. I'll have to get back with you on that in terms of breed. But basically, both parents are crossbreds, and then they breed into each other to get the Cornish cross. Yes. 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 And huge volumes, because basically, if you get birds at Chick-fil-A, if you like eating Chick-fil-A, McDonald's chicken sandwich, all of those are all using Cornish crossbreeds. They're all Cornish cross. Right. Okay, good question. All right. I think that brings us to the, all right, feed. Let me talk that real quick. Baby chicks need a minimum of 20% protein. A minimum of 20% protein. We want to read feed tags. As they're growing, we can go to a grower ration, which is a minimum of 15% protein. That's usually somewhere between 12 and 20 weeks. When they start egg laying, we want to make sure that they have a sustained level of 16% protein in their diets. We have some bags of feed over here, and I'll go through and talk about those as we get up and look directly at those. And then again, just making sure that we have lots of clean, fresh water. We want to watch the free ranging and the fruit and the grain and the snacks that we give them. We want to give them a good secure location because there are a lot of predators. We want to make sure that they have in housing. We want it to be safe. We want to make sure that they have at least 3 square feet per bird to move about. Okay. 3 square feet per bird is going to give them plenty of room where they're not pecking on one another and where they're comfortable. In terms of housing space and run space, you want to kind of think about, you know, I've got 3 square feet in my house, but I've got a little run. You want to calculate that in as well. That run space is going to give them room to kind of spread out from each other. Nest boxes, you'll need 1 nest box for every 6 to 8 birds. You can have more than that, but they won't necessarily use them, okay? So 1 box for every 6 to 8 birds. And clean shavings, you can use a little bit of 7 dust in the nest boxes to help control mites and lice. And it's a very safe way of kind of helping keep those parasites off of them. And a nest box, good size for a standard size bird is a 14-inch cube. Will make a great nest box. And you can get creative, you know, a 5-gallon bucket makes a great nest box if you can secure it so that when they're flying in, getting in and out of it. Typically we want the back side of that nest box to be kind of dark or solid and covered so that they feel like they like to feel like they're hiding their eggs. Okay, so if we have just a cube and it's light on both sides, they're probably not going to use that space to lay in. All right, there's Abby a few years ago. All right, and what we like to say is everybody likes a good hug now and then. Making sure that we have a safe, secure environment for our birds and we're providing them all the nutrition they need is probably the best hug that we can give them. Okay. I'm not sure that chicken was enjoying that squeeze as much as Abby was. All right. Okay, so we can stop the slideshow and we'll zoom in here on what Abby's holding. This is a brown leghorn.
One second, let me share my screen.
Okay. And a white leghorn would have that head twitching all around everywhere because she'd be nervous. I don't know who all these people are. I don't know what else going on. What in the world did you bring me out here for? You can see she's pretty laid back. She's pretty calm. Mature weight, she will never get more than about 5 pounds. She's an egg laying machine. She's very, very efficient in terms of the
Sorry, it's my face.
egg production.
There we go.
There we go. Typically white egg laying breeds, and Abby, I want to have you point these things out. White egg laying breeds are typically going to have a white earlobe, okay? And so if you'll notice on the side of her cheek there, that's her earlobe, and it's white in color. Typically, brown egg laying breeds are going to have a brown earlobe. As the birds get a little more exotic, that doesn't, Americanas don't have green earlobes, but they lay green eggs. All right, but that's a general rule of thumb. Your white egg layers are going to have that white earlobe. White egg layers typically are smaller and follow that line. They're a Mediterranean breed, so they're going to be a little smaller. And white leghorns, brown leghorns, there's some other white egg laying breeds.
Well, now that I'm thinking about it.
Yeah,
They're all gonna say
white face black Spanish. You'll see a lot of those in your white egg laying breeds. Yes, ma'am. This is very different than the cream leg bar, but looks similar.
I have one back.
You have a cream leg bar, okay? So with that, Abby, I'm going to have you kind of demonstrate. When we're checking hens, and we've got some gloves up here, this is where we can kind of get hands-on if you guys want to do that.
Y'all want to come up and
One of the things that we sometimes want to do is evaluate whether or not our hens are laying or they're not. And these girls will go back into some kind of sequester. They'll go into an environment because we knew this is going to happen. We have birds. We've got a quarantine area that we can kind of set them aside. But we would ask you if you want to do this to wear gloves. When we're trying to figure out, hey, I've got 15 hens and I'm only getting 7 eggs a day. What's the deal with that? And which ones aren't producing? You got 2 methods. One, you can sit in your chicken house and wait until one lays, okay, and put a mark on it and go, hey, that one's laying. Or you can check to see if they are in production. On the back side, where that little powder puff area of feathers are, if you feel around on that powder puff, you will find the tips of their pelvic bones, and they feel a little bit like the ends of 2 pencils. They're kind of pointy. You can find them pretty quickly by using the palm of your hand like Abby's doing. When you find those 2 pin bones coming off of their pelvis, if they are not in production, those pin bones are going to be really close together, and I can usually only get 1 finger between those 2 little pin bones. If they're in production, I might be able to get as many as 4 fingers in between those pin bones. Hens that are in production are producing a hormone called relaxin. Relaxin causes that pelvic bone to really spread nice and wide. That way, when she lays that egg, she doesn't have any trouble passing that egg through that pelvic area. When she goes into a time of rest, which all hens do, there's not a chicken that will lay every single day all the time. They'll lay, they'll take a break, they'll recover. And what they're recovering is pigment. If you'll notice on her legs are kind of bleached out. They're kind of white in color. What that means is she's in production. Is she in production? I'll tell them wrong. She's getting there. She's coming in or going. She's probably going out of production. They will bleach out when they come. And that literally is a good thing. The yellow that is in our yolks on our eggs is coming from the pigment that they store in their legs, in their beak, around their eye rings. They have it in a few other places on their body. We have a competition or a contest in 4-H called Poultry Judging, and kids can actually, based on the amount of pigmentation, tell you about how many eggs this bird has laid in this laying cycle, based on the amount of pigment they have left in them. When they completely bleach out, they're going to take a break. No matter what you're feeding them, they're going to take a break. And the first thing they're going to do is they're going to flip a gear, and all of their dietary protein is no longer going to egg production. Now it's going to feather production. And they're going to begin losing their feathers. Her feathers are not in great quality. If you look, her tail feathers are they're a little bit disheveled. Some of them are broken off. If they break a feather while they're in egg production, they just deal with it. They're not going to regrow that feather. What they're going to do is they're going to do that all at once. That's called a molt. Okay? Molting is when new feathers grow in, they recharge, they replenish that pigmentation, and their legs will start to get yellow, and their beak will start to get yellow, and they'll get yellow back around in their eye rings. And once they're completely recharged with pigment, they'll start into their next egg production cycle. Yes, ma'am.
You just answered it. I was asking, talking about cycles. That's what I was thinking.
Yeah.
What was the cause? And not just like, they don't lay every single day. It's not like in cycle then not. And
Yeah, usually when they pause, it's a 30 to 45 to 60 day pause. Okay, and typically The longer the pause at one given time, the longer the egg production season after that pause. Some birds will molt some breeds will molt a couple of times a year. So they'll take they'll take a good 6 weeks off and they'll recharge and they'll kind of have, that production cycle, and then they'll cycle back in again. Some of your really heavy producers, like your sex-linked varieties, they're gonna take one break a year, and it's going to be a sustained break to replenish and recharge. Yes, ma'am. No, not really. Their disposition changes if they go broody, and that's when they decide, I'm going to sit on this nest of eggs and try and hatch them. Then the disposition changes, and they'll draw blood on you when you try and reach in and take that egg. They'll hiss, their feathers will get all fluffy. They go from singing to clucking. There's literally a vocalization change, and they'll cluck, 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 cluck. Okay, and they get really aggressive around protecting those eggs when that happens. That's when you get a disposition change. It's pretty significant. Yes, sir.
Well, now I've got two questions.
Okay.
I'll ask on that first. When they do get broody, do you call them, or is there something else that?
Okay. Depends on your need. Like if you're needing birds that are producing and you don't have time to wait, it's going to take, once they go broody, it's going to take a minimum of about 12 weeks before they'll come back into egg production. But you got to break them from being broody, which means you got to take them off of anything and away from anything that resembles a nest. Which usually means an individual cage where there's nothing that they can look at and go, oh, that's a nest. If you put them in a pen, it has a rock, they'll pull that rock up and they'll sit on that rock. I mean, it's a really strong drive. So to break them, you got to go at least a week with them away from anything that's a nest or anything that resembles an egg that they can sit on. And then you'll hear the vocalization change. They'll go from that deep cluck back up to the singing, and then they've got to recharge. And so they'll go through a mini molt, if you will, coming out of being broody.
So you could break that 12 week broodiness with 1 week of isolation.
Yes, and then they're going to have some time recovering, because what's happening is not just we're breaking them from the behavior. We now then have to let them recover and go through the hormone cycle that will get them back into egg production.
Another question I have is about
Go ahead and grab that cream leg bar.
we talked about macronutrients and how much protein they have, but I was curious, what are some of the main micronutrients that chickens need for good egg production?
Okay, no, that's a great question. For those of you on Zoom, the question was, what kind of micronutrients do they need? And it begins with protein, right? We hear protein, we go, okay, great, we got enough protein. They need a balance of lysine and methionine as well. And so we want to make sure, and all lysine and methionine are amino acids. So a protein is a chain of amino acids, all right? Guanine, cytosine, they went through and did basic genetics to kind of know those long amino acid chains. If they're limited in lysine and methionine, they have 25% protein and they're not going to do really well. Okay, so that's where we were wanting to look at the feed label and look at the balance. We're going to have at least 1 to 1.2% lysine in that feed, in that particular quality of protein that we're getting, in order for them to have sustained production. In terms of micronutrients, calcium's a big one. Calcium is what they make calcium carbonate, which is basically the eggshell. We want to make sure that they've got phosphorus. I mean, a lot of those things are in a balanced ration. They're already put in there. So we're feeding a good balanced ration that has calcium supplements already in it. We're not having to go buy supplemental calcium in the form of oyster shell to feed those birds so that they get that. Okay? We also never want to put oyster shell in their feed and force them to eat it. If you want to feed a calcium supplement, put it in a bowl by itself, they'll eat what they need and they'll stop. They won't continue to consume it. All right, so this is, you'll notice she looks a whole lot like a brown leghorn. This is a cream leg bar. Cream leg bars are increasingly popular. She lays a blue egg. And if you'll notice, she has a comb, a whole lot like a brown leghorn, but she also has a little feather crest up on top of her head. Very docile, very, very easygoing, but this is an auto-sexing breed. So when they hatch, they're not a crossbred, but when they hatch, all of the females have kind of a brindle color, but the males have a yellow dot on the top of their head. So we can sex them based on their coloration. They're one of the few auto-sexing breeds.
Can you repeat the breed? Presume they couldn't hear.
It is a cream leg bar. So cream, or some people call them a crested cream leg bar. They're increasing in popularity. Anytime there's kind of a rare breed, kind of a new breed, they're extraordinarily expensive. And then people start breeding birds that look similar to them and selling them as knockoffs because they can make a lot of money pretty quickly on them. It took us a little while to get good quality breed stock for them. Good quality breed stock. If you're doing the genetics thing where you're wanting to hatch quality poultry, you're looking at $40 to $50 a piece day old for breed stock. So there's a sizable investment. We do that because we want to make sure that customers who are buying the chicks are actually getting what they're going to get. And a lot of the times we'll raise that breed stock and make sure they're meeting production standards and APA standards or American Poultry Association standards before we ever sell to the public. But cream leg bars are a fun breed because they are extremely docile. And the biggest thing is that they just lay a beautiful blue egg. You've got kids, it's really fun. I'm getting a white egg out of this nest box and getting a brown egg. Oh, look at this blue egg. It's like Easter every day. It's great. Okay.
What do we have gloves for?
All right. So for any of you that would like to do kind of a test and see if you can find and locate those pelvic bones, we'll do that here in just a little bit. We'll take a break and do that. What are we like
We
on
got
time?
about 4 minutes.
About 4 minutes. Go switch out the breeds here real quick. Yes.
You have laying hens and then you bring in new chicks, but you want to not put the flock together when the chicks are ready to go outside.
Great question. All right, so what we want to do is we want to make sure if we have an existing flock and we're raising some replacement birds, or we're just growing the size of our flock, we want to keep those baby chicks separate until they're at least 15 weeks old or approximately the same size as those mature birds. If we introduce them sooner, it's not going to end well. Mature birds really try and protect against an invasive species, and they will attack them and kill them. Unless that bird is about the same size and that bird will push back. Pecking order, we hear that term a lot, it's a real thing. And they will go through and figure out what the pecking order is anytime we introduce new birds. We just want to make sure that they're old enough and mature enough they can blend in. In terms of feed, it never hurts to, if we're taking birds that are 15 weeks, we've got them on a grower ration that's 15% protein. Now they're going to start eating a layer ration that's 16% protein. We've not hurt them at all. So we can go ahead and introduce them on that. If we're raising a flock completely from scratch, we recommend keeping them on a starter ration that has that elevated protein all the way until they lay their first egg. Okay, but you can certainly do that. This is one of those this is a splash laced Wyandotte. You'll notice a lot of the birds that Abby's bringing in here look a little rough in terms of feather quality. They've just been through January, okay? And they look about like I felt in January, okay? Tired of the bad weather. They have not gone through, these are young juvenile birds, they have not gone through their first molt. But if you'll notice on this leg, I don't know whether y'all can see it or not, she's got a little bit of pigment left there. That yellow kind of color in there, and that's an indicator that she's not done laying yet. Right? She's still in her egg cycle. She's still got some pigment left. And she'll continue to lay eggs until all that pigment's gone. If we have any other breeds, go ahead and bring them out. Yes, ma'am.
I had a question with what you were asking before.
Okay.
If you have like a hen and a rooster and you allow them to raise hatch eggs, is it the same thing with you keep the chicks separate from the flock, or will they be accepted into the flock because the mother's part of the flock? That's
a very good question. If you let a mother raise a flock or raise basically offspring that she has sat on, and you don't separate the babies, your survival rate's going to be pretty small because they're easy pickings for predators. If that baby chick wanders away from mama and gets around another mature hen, she's going to peck it to death. I mean, you'll see attrition happens really quick. She hatches 18 and she's in with a flock. Next week, you might only have 9. The week after that, there may be only 2 or 3 that are able to stay with mama the entire time. What I recommend to folks is, let mama come off the nest with them, let her have a couple of days, being able to brood. But if you can get those chicks into a brooding environment, you're doing 2 things. You're going to get that hen to recover a lot quicker. Sitting on a nest of eggs is extremely hard on them physically. They don't get off to do anything other than grab a drink of water. They literally don't eat a great deal during that time. So we're going to let mama get back to eating and kind of get back into her cycle in terms of production, but we're also keeping those baby chicks where we're going to raise a much larger percentage of them. We're also going to keep them a little bit protected from some of the bacterial flora they're going to be exposed to in that larger flock until their immune systems are strong enough to be able to
So
fend
would
those things off.
it be more suggested to just incubate them and keep them separate? Like, is that?
It's a lot easier on the hen if we incubate. That's the great thing about incubators. It's a good intervention process to keep your hens from going through that stress. All right, so this is a blue sex link. And basically, blue sex links, the females are this kind of bluish gray color. The males end up being a little bit more of a white. They've got little hints of blue on them. Blue sex links became real popular where everybody wanted their chickens to be blue, right? Part of that's a trend and a fad. Fads come and go, but the blue chickens became a real big thing. These girls are actually really good egg producers. They lay a brown egg. They don't lay a blue egg. They lay a brown egg, and again, that high producing brown egg. 280 to 320 eggs a year. Okay.
How do you check the pigment on those though, since they're here?
That's a very good question. Some breeds you can't really define pigment. So your Jersey black giants, your Australorps that have black legs, you can't see the pigment because the melanin in the skin ends up covering that pigment. We can't see it as well. Okay. Yes, ma'am. What's going on when you have a wrinkled egg? Nature, percentages, every once in a while. So what ends up happening, quick egg production line, all right? Egg is attached to an ovary. A hen is born with every egg she'll ever lay in her life already formed in her. Okay? So if you want to use supplemental lighting, and egg production is governed by photoperiod. So when days get short, egg production typically stops. If we want to keep that hen laying, we want to provide some lighting in our coop so that they have about 12 hours, at least 10 to 12 hours of light in a particular day. But all of those eggs are already formed in them when they hatch. They just are really, really small. So as an egg separates from the ovary, it goes down the ovary duct and down this fallopian tube. And as it goes down, it goes through a process. It gets larger. Albumins are added. The egg white gets added around the yolk. And as it gets down to the final stage, it kind of goes through if you go to Nissan and look at the auto manufacturing line, it goes through the paint section, right? It gets the paint put on. The eggshell gets put on like a coat of paint. That's where the different eggshell color has to do with the pigments they're putting into that shell. But that calcium carbonate is flexible until it hits oxygen. So when that hen lays that egg, as that egg's coming out, that shell is hardening almost instantaneously. And sometimes, maybe because she's straining, maybe because there was a little twist in that oviduct or in that fallopian tube, as that egg comes out, it had a little crimp in it, and so we'll get an egg that's got wrinkles in it or that's kind of twisted up. You get some really funky looking ones sometimes that are that way. It's just a fluke, and it happens. It's completely and totally natural. And sometimes you'll get one without a shell. You just have the membrane, and it's a really soft egg. That's because it went through the assembly line a little too quick and didn't get enough paint put on it. That's the simple way to kind of explain that. Does it what now? Age. Pullets that are laying their 12th egg ever in their life can do it. Older hens can do it. It's not really age dependent. It just has to do with the speed at which that egg is traveling through. Now, your higher production birds will have a higher instance of them only because it's a volume thing. They're passing more eggs through, and so you want to have that. It's edible. There's nothing wrong with the egg. It's edible. It's just got a funky shell on it. Yes, ma'am. Yes, that's very good. So when we're looking at feeds, we want to stay away from medicated feeds. when we have hens that are in production. So starter feeds, you'll see, medicated option. If you're moving baby chicks into a new environment, a medicated, which is ampoulin, it's basically a feed additive that helps boost their immune system. We're changing environments. We might want to feed a medicated feed through one cycle, one bag of medicated feed, and get it back on non-medicated. But we certainly want to make sure we're not feeding a medicated feed when they start laying, because that bird will concentrate any of that medication in the egg. Couple of common occurring things, eggs, meat spots and blood spots. Sometimes you break an egg open, you'll see a little drop of blood. A lot of folks throw that egg away. You do not have to, okay? What happens was when that little bitty microscopic yolk broke free from the ovary that produced it, there was a little bleed. And that just stayed stuck to the egg and it got encased. Again, it's packaged in a biosecure sanitary environment inside that shell. And so you can cook that and eat that. Sometimes more than just a drop of blood, part of the ovary itself will break off and we'll see something that looks like a little piece of meat. That's exactly what it is. Those are edible as well. Now, obviously, as they get larger, if you got one that's got a big blood spot or a big meat spot in it, more from just the standpoint, if you're like me, you look at it and you go, I got plenty of eggs. I don't think you. Here, Fluffy. That's where the cat gets to eat that one. Okay, but from a food safety standpoint, it's not an issue of food safety. Yes, ma'am.
And how long can you keep the eggs out of the refrigerator?
A lot longer than you'd like. Okay, it's a great question. An egg can sit at room temperature. In fact, in Europe, they don't even refrigerate eggs, right? Egg refrigeration is kind of an American thing. And so we judge the rest of the world by that and think, well, they ought to be doing it too. 3 weeks, 4 weeks. If you'll think about a hen, she lays one egg basically every day, and she'll set on about 20 eggs. How many days did it take her to get to 20 eggs? 20 days, right? So about 3 weeks. The only thing that changes is sitting out at room temperature. If it's unwashed, if we haven't washed it, that egg will be very edible and it will not dehydrate much because it has an invisible layer called the bloom on the outside. So the last thing the hen puts on that egg is called the bloom, and it's kind of a sealant, and it helps prevent that egg from dehydrating. When I bring those eggs into my sink and I wash them, I wash the bloom off, and now that egg's going to begin dehydrating. It doesn't ruin the quality of the egg. It just means that the air cell at the very top of the egg is going to get larger and larger and larger because moisture is escaping from the shell. So the way that I reduce that is to put it in a carton, put it in the refrigerator. And by refrigerating it, I'm slowing down the evaporation. A refrigerated egg, okay, when we do poultry judging, all right, Abby's grinning because when we do poultry judging, we're getting the kids to, candle eggs and look at the size of the air spot. A small air cell is a grade A, okay, which means it's fresher typically. As that air cell gets bigger, it's a grade B. We had eggs in the refrigerator for a year to get them to grade B. Okay, so you can have an egg that's been refrigerated for 6 months, open it up, and it's completely edible. Now, if you open it up and it's got an odor to it, not so much. Something's gone wrong there. But those food packages will last a very long time. Yes, ma'am.
You said something about handling. Where do we get classes to get licensed to be able to do that?
Man, you need to be in 4-H because we teach all of our 4-Hers how to do that. There's not a license necessarily to candle. I will tell you with the invention of these things here, you've got an egg candler if you've got a mobile phone that has a flashlight on it. Because when I turn that thing on and put it up on an egg, I can see where the air cell is. If the room's dark, I can really see where that, and I can detect blood spots and meat spots and stuff like that, and they're pretty easily just with that.
Does Extension have any publications or anything about it?
Extension probably does have some you know what, you can go to the National Poultry Judging. You can Google 4-H National Poultry Judging, and all of the poultry judging materials that we teach the kids are all on there. You can go through and learn that, or you can just Google how to candle an egg. There's a lot of YouTube videos and stuff out there that will show you how to go about doing that, and also help you understand what you're looking at when you're actually using a candle. Yes, sir.
So on those meat spots, you mentioned that's often when a piece of the ovary breaks off. Is the chicken injured then, as far as egg production goes?
No, those eggs are all attached to something that looks like, if you could think about a cluster of grapes. Okay, they're kind of veined out where there's a little egg on the end of each stem. In the case of a meat spot, part of the stem broke off when that ovary was released. Okay. Yes, sir.
I'd like to know about health. So other than a bright comb, color of the legs, how else can you tell if your birds are healthy and laying? And is it having to do with poop, diarrhea?
You want to turn that?
Sure.
Yeah, there you go.
Do you want to take it?
Yeah.
Chicken and dancer?
Is that a black ass?
Oh, yeah, we didn't talk about the breed.
Yeah. We need to talk about what? Oh,
Breed.
this is a black Australorp. Black Australorp, her comb is a little bit small. Black Australorps hold the world record for the most eggs laid in a year, 364. Okay, that doesn't mean every black Australorp is going to do that. Okay, but again, very docile, dual purpose breed. She's about 6.5 pounds. So yeah, that's the breed that she is. Okay.
So in terms of health, one of the biggest indicators is they will really like show you when they're not feeling very well. Their wings will usually be kind of drooped down. Their eyes will look kind of tired and things like that. When it comes to their poop, sometimes there might be like blood in their poop sometimes. And usually if you get them, when that's an issue, you might want to put on some medicated feed. Clearly, as my dad said, kind of stop eating their eggs since it's on the medicated feed. But when they're just looking like overall not very good, you'll want to separate them with a few other birds from your flock so that doesn't spread, and just make sure that they've got a good amount of water. Sometimes we put just a little bit of Gatorade in there to get them some more electrolytes. And then, just a medicated feed, but they'll really kind of show you by the way that they're acting. They'll be moving kind of slow. They'll look really tired. Those are just the main indicators for that.
Droop the heads, wings will sometimes spread out a little bit. They'll just look like you and I would look when we're not feeling well. Okay, you'll see them as opposed to being alert, heads up, eyes are bright, clear. They're not wheezing. Listen to them breathe. If you don't hear any rattling or anything like that going on, that's usually a good indicator of them being in good health.
Before we answer any more questions, is there anything for anyone on Zoom that you wanted to show them? I can show them on the video.
Yeah, I don't know that there's. Let me just go through feeds when you're looking at that for the folks on Zoom. And then everything else is going to be kind of a hands-on component.
See on the screen.
You're feeding baby chicks. You want to look for the big bold words chick starter. Okay. And you want to look at the feed label, not necessarily the feed brand. Okay. Purina, probably the world's leader in terms of poultry nutrition. Checkerboard, they've got a great quality feed, but you are probably going to pay a little bit more for the brand. Okay. Are you getting a bad deal? No, not at all. They spend a tremendous amount of time producing a good quality feed. But there are a lot of feed companies that are closer to us that manufacture and that actually blend and make their feeds, and they're closer proximity, so we don't have the shipping costs. We don't have those costs. It's a thing about economics. If we'll read the feed tag, and every single feed bag we get is going to have a tag down here on the bottom that states all of the nutrition that's in there, and it's going to include stuff like lysine, a minimum of 0.8%. It's going to have methionine. It's going to have all the breakdown of what's in that feed. We want to make sure that our baby chicks are getting at least a minimum of 18% protein. It can range up to about 21, 22%. Anything more than that we're feeding, we're wasting money because they can't make use of it. Right? So if a chick starter goes, hey, we got 24% protein, that's great. My chickens don't need 24% protein, so paying more for it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Tucker Milling, this is a Tucker Milling brand called Show Flock Starter. They have a little bit different process. Again, it's going to be a little higher in protein than maybe a standard chick starter. When we're feeding birds that have started laying, we want to make sure that we see this big word layer on there. You can get just about every feed in a pellet or a crumble. Which one's better? It depends on which one your birds waste the least of. You feed a crumble, sometimes they'll pick through looking for the bigger bites and they'll waste all the rest of it. So by feeding a pellet, sometimes they'll waste fewer of the pellets, but sometimes they get bored and they just want a little change. So many times we'll rotate back and forth in terms of what we're feeding and just watching the bird behavior, seeing what's the rate of consumption versus how much I'm finding on the ground that they're feeding out and then they're wasting. Okay. In terms of your breeder setup, the folks that are used to on Zoom, again, just so that you kind of have an idea, general idea of what your brooding environment might want to look like. Like I said, you pick the containers. You just mainly want to make sure that it's secure, and you want to put your feed, your water, typically at the opposite end of where your primary heat zone is. So if your heat zone is on this side, you want to put food and water on the other side. You're going to encourage those birds to do a little exercising, even in that group area. They'll go get a drink of water and go, "Ooh, I'm a little chilled," and they'll come back, and then they'll go back and eat a little food, and they'll come back, and that kind of keeps them moving in that tank.
Walk around.
All right.
All right, for those on Zoom, y'all can head off for the night. We're gonna do some hands-on if people want to. And your questions on Zoom, I will have those saved when this ends. And if it didn't get answered, I'll make sure it gets answered. Thank you for everyone on Zoom.
Oh, yeah, no, that's fine. Yeah, no, that's fine. Just keep on.